Confidentiality in the laboratory. When you think of a laboratory, you probably imagine people working with samples, analyzing data, and using state-of-the-art equipment. However, there is a crucial aspect that is often overlooked: confidentiality. In an environment where information is as valuable as the results themselves, protecting confidentiality is not just good practice, but an essential requirement. Today, we will explore how confidentiality is addressed in the IEC 17025 standard and why it is vital for any laboratory. Confidentiality, a fundamental pillar. Imagine working in a laboratory that conducts tests for a new drug formula. The pharmaceutical company that hired you trusts that the results of these tests will remain secure and protected from their competitors. This is where confidentiality comes into play. The IEC 17025 standard stipulates that laboratories must ensure the confidentiality of all information obtained or created during the performance of laboratory activities. This includes not only test results, but also any customer data, test methods, technical procedures, or any other sensitive information. The value of trust. To illustrate the importance of confidentiality, let's consider the following scenario. Catherine is an analyst working in a food research laboratory. Recently, her team received a request to analyze a new recipe from a client aiming to launch a revolutionary product in the market. The client trusts that Catherine and her team will not only conduct a precise and accurate analysis, but also keep all the details of the formula secret. If confidentiality were breached, competitors could access the formula before the client could launch it to the market, leading to significant financial losses and a possible reputation crisis for both the client and the laboratory. So, how can a laboratory ensure that confidentiality is maintained at every stage? This is where IEC 17025 provides clear guidance. Laboratories must implement policies and procedures that protect customer information and ensure that only authorized personnel have access to it. For example, Catherine and her team could employ measures such as confidentiality agreements, signed by all employees and collaborators, ensuring that sensitive information is handled appropriately. Access control, restricting access to critical areas of the laboratory and IT systems where sensitive data is stored. Ongoing training, regular staff training on the importance of confidentiality and how to handle information securely. Internal audits, periodic reviews to ensure that all confidentiality procedures are being followed. Breaking down confidentiality according to IEC 17025. As we have seen, confidentiality is a fundamental aspect of laboratory operations, and the IEC 17025 standard addresses it in detail in its latest version. Here's a simple and practical explanation of what this standard establishes, so that you can understand how to apply it in your laboratory. Laboratory responsibility. The standard establishes that the laboratory is responsible for managing all the information it obtains or creates during its activities. This responsibility is formalized through legally enforceable agreements, which means the laboratory must sign contracts or agreements ensuring that all information will be handled confidentially. For example, if a laboratory conducts tests for a pharmaceutical company, it must ensure that the data obtained from those tests are treated with complete confidentiality. Additionally, if the laboratory decides to make any information public, it must inform the client before doing so. This is crucial for maintaining the client's trust. It is also specified that unless the client has agreed for the information to be public or has disclosed it themselves, all information must be considered the client's property and treated as confidential. Disclosure of confidential information due to legal obligation. Sometimes the laboratory may be legally required or authorized by a contract to disclose confidential information. For example, if a regulatory body requires certain information, the laboratory must provide it. However, before doing so, the laboratory must notify the client or interested party about what information will be disclosed unless the law prohibits such notification. This ensures that the client is aware of any possible disclosure of their information, protecting their interests and allowing them to take whatever actions they deem necessary. Confidentiality of information obtained from third parties. This part of the standard refers to information that the laboratory obtains from sources other than the client, such as a third-party complaint or information from regulatory bodies. This information must also be treated as confidential and not shared with the client without the source's consent. For example, if a laboratory receives a consumer complaint about the quality of a product it analyzed for a client, the consumer's name and the specific details of the complaint must remain confidential unless the consumer has authorized sharing that information. Confidentiality by laboratory staff and other actors. Finally, the standard stipulates that all laboratory personnel, including contractors, committee members, external personnel, or anyone acting on behalf of the laboratory, must maintain the confidentiality of the information obtained or created during the laboratory's activities, except when required otherwise by law. This means that not only direct laboratory employees are obligated to maintain confidentiality, but also anyone else who has access to the information, such as external auditors or consultants. To ensure this, the laboratory should implement measures such as confidentiality agreements for all involved personnel. Practical application in the laboratory. To understand how to apply these guidelines, let's return to our earlier example of Catherine's laboratory conducting tests for a food company. 1. Catherine and her team signed confidentiality agreements at the start of their contracts, ensuring they will handle all information confidentially. 2. If the laboratory ever needs to share results with a regulatory body, the laboratory must notify the client before doing so. 3. If the laboratory receives additional information about the sample from an external source, that information is kept confidential and not shared with the client without proper authorization. 4. All personnel working with Catherine, including external consultants, must adhere to strict confidentiality policies to ensure no information is leaked. Conclusion. The ISO Chachujais IEC 17025 standard provides a clear and precise framework for managing confidentiality in a laboratory. Understanding and applying these principles not only ensures regulatory compliance, but also strengthens trust with clients, protecting both their information and the laboratory's reputation. At the end of the day, confidentiality is not just about complying with the standard, but about protecting the interests of those who trust your services. And as we have seen with practical examples and appropriate measures, it is possible to maintain this confidentiality at every step of the process.